Welcome, everybody, to the first ever episode of Breaking Cardboard. What is it? Well, it's a live version, if you will, of Sports Card Nation, but we changed the name because we're not doing it every week. It's going to be once a month, every second Friday of the month at 9:30. It's interactive, so we'll post chat comments on the screen. We won't take call-ins like we do if you're familiar with Hobby Hotline. Generally about 45 minutes to an hour. Again, I got a lot of requests to do sort of a regular live show. We've done some special ones, including one for episode 100, which Dr. Jim graciously appeared on. And so we're going to do one a month. There's no way I could do more than that, as much as it'd be fun. And I don't want to overkill anything anyway. So I'm glad to do it. I hope everyone enjoys it. I want to welcome. The other thing we're going to do with this show, everyone, is besides me, have a guest host, someone who will also ask questions of our special guests, and we'll try to rotate that each month and get some new folks on every month, so it's just not my ugly mug all the time. So with that being said, I want to introduce tonight's panel, starting with the guest host, Corey, but more affectionately known as Yamwax. One of the nicest gentlemen this hobby has in it. The hobby's a better place with them in it. And, it's taught me, someone who's been in this hobby a long time, to sort of think outside the box and don't always be so rigid in what you look at and collect. And I know he's had that effect on a lot of other people as well. So, welcome to the first episode.
Thank you so much, John. It's an absolute honor to be here with you, Go to the Hobby. And I see that you've prepared a wall today to match our esteemed guest, Dr. Beckett.
Yeah, I got a ways to go. I don't think I have enough time to catch up, even if I was gonna try. And that's a good segue into our special guest for the episode number 1. As I always say, a man that needs no introduction, but I will give him one, a proper one, just the same. Dr. James Beckett. Again, if you don't know who he is, I don't know where you've been, but glad to call him my friend, and glad he kind of come on the first episode here and talk about the hobby. So welcome, Dr. Jim.
Thanks, John. I do have a wall of fame, but as Corey was saying, but you have eyes for only one card on the wall, and I'm going to move my head so it can be observed.
Yeah, I would love to get that, as most know if they've heard my show, the 48 Leaf Jackie Robinson, but it's maybe someday a lesser condition. There was one I saw in Chicago that caught my eye, but no dice, as they say. Gentlemen, before we kind of get into the show here, we had a couple passings in the hobby related, that I want to sort of pay our proper respects to. The first one, a longtime dealer, a hobby icon himself, like Dr. Jim, Rich Altman. Now, full disclosure, I've only had really some surface conversations with Mr. Altman, so I don't want to claim to know him very well, but I know, for being in the hobby a long time myself, I knew very well who he was, and was just at the National. I actually talked to him briefly there, and passed away earlier this week. So respects to the Altman family during this difficult time. And another one that hits a little closer to home, because he's a very good friend of mine, and his mother passed away, and many know him, Tim Virgilio, who runs Signature for Soldiers, which was the official charity of choice for the National in Chicago, and his mom has passed away. So thinking of the Virgilio family as well. So wanted to just kind of pay proper respects there. And so let's now that we've done that, anything you want to add, Dr. Jim or Yam? I know you might have, you probably knew him better than I with Rich Altman.
Well, I got a short tribute episode to Rich tomorrow morning, one of my podcasts. So it's a big loss. I mean, he was larger than life in several ways, and I knew him from 35 years ago, and seen him. I didn't have extended conversations with him all the time. We weren't best buddies, but I certainly had a lot of positive interactions with him over the years in as many different capacities that he had, because he wore a lot of hats and was an amazing guy. So very sad, very sad.
Yeah. For those,
absolutely. I was just to say, aware of them as important figures, and my thoughts and my heart goes out to their families.
Yep. For those watching in the chat room, feel free to chat, ask questions. I will put them on the screen, and we will sometimes obviously react to them, especially in question form. But the format that that I kind of came up with this show, and Dr. Jim's our first test subject, if you will, is we're going to, with the guest host and myself, we're going to just alternate questions. We may not get to all of them based on time. So I told Corey to put them in the order that he would like to ask them in. I'm going to start with the first one for Dr. Jim. We all were at the National, all three of us. For those that don't know, Dr. Jim has never missed one National. He's been to every one. Was there anything with this recent Chicago one that surprised you at all? Something you saw or noticed or discovered? Did anything kind of catch you off guard that maybe you didn't expect?
Well, not catch me off guard, but I just think we shouldn't have too much of a fixation on the raw attendance numbers of whether there were 100,000 or more or less. Whatever there were there, two things stand out. People were enthusiastically there and not just lookers, and almost half of them were brand new. Were new to the National. So both those are really positive. I was there in '91 at the Anaheim National, which was a promo fest in many respects. It was an amazing show. Lots of energy and enthusiasm there too. But these were people walking the floor, really working the dealers, the tables. Again, a lot of energy. So it bodes very well for the future.
That's great. Well, I'm going to take a step back on the National and zoom out a little bit and take a broader view of it. But before I do, Dr. Beckett, it's an absolute honor. I feel like I need to say this as, my young version of me is so cool to think back, to hanging out with guys, my buddies, Dave Libman and all these, guys, the magazines we would get together to hang out over. We're flipping through the price guides of the Beckett price guides and your creations. I'd say right next to the BMX bike magazines. We were trying to turn our Huffies into Haros, but those were the tops for sure. And so I respect everything else.
My younger self thanks your younger self.
Okay, perfect. The 80s were great, man. But so zooming out on the National, I'm jumping ahead my questions a little bit because John started out there. Let's say that there's a scenario where you've suddenly been pushed into a room. Maybe your buddy Rich Klein, slams the door behind you, and suddenly you find you're all alone. You've been entrusted. They've said to you, of course, Dr. Beckett, we trust you. We want to give you this opportunity. We've locked you in the National for 3 hours before it even begins. The entire floor is yours. No one's around, no cameras. What is it that you're going to go consume, look at, spend your time on in an empty National?
Gosh, I don't even know that I'd probably squander it. If there were no people there or just cards.
Wait.
Well, I don't know. I guess I'd make a rapid. I mean, I'm kind of encyclopedic, so I don't think I wouldn't spend 3 hours looking at the Wagner or a perfect mantle. I'd probably do a speed tour because then it's like a museum. When I go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I'm burning a lot of calories. So I think I'd hit it real hard. I would see everything because that's kind of the way I used to do it. I wouldn't put anything in my pocket. I'm not sure I'd buy anything at the end of the 3 hours, but I'd have a great time. But it'd be more fun. You go slower, but it'd be more fun if there were a bunch of people there.
That's cool because I was there for 2.5 days. And I almost got to spend no time on cards, and it was a wonderful experience. But I spent so much time connecting with people that I've met online, and it was fantastic. But it's a little bit of a dream to get to just spend some solo time there.
Yeah, and Dr. Beckett made a great point. The national released that 47% of the tickets purchased were first-time attendees. And when I heard that, I knew the number was going to be high, guys, but that number really shocked me. When you think 47%, that's almost half of everyone you saw there. And there's a lot of people, which I think, like Dr. Beckett says, I think it speaks to how many people were actually there, because there were a lot of people there for not their first time. And so for the fact that 47% went to their first show, and let's not lose sight of the fact that it's during a pandemic too, where maybe a lot of people did not go, that decided to sit this one out for a better scenario somewhere down the line. And so that number, if to answer my own question, I think that number, I knew it was going to be high. I just didn't realize it was going to be that high at 47%.
Well, they weren't. The new people weren't people that have just shown up, that just started collecting a month ago, or 2 months ago, or 3 months ago. I think there were an awful lot of them that started in 2020, and that's really what you're looking at. So I don't think they considered themselves newbies or rookies. They just hadn't been to a national, and they maybe hadn't been to shows. But some of these newbies, so to speak, have been very active in the hobby and are going after the big cards, because that's where they like to jump in. So they may be new to the national, but they hit the ground running.
Yeah, I was one of those newbies who have been in with my son since 2018, and it was a hobby palooza for sure. And I met lots of other folks like me who had been in that 2018 to 2020 entrance point, where we were all just really having a great time. Now, you talked about going for the big cards, Dr. Beckett. What I really appreciate about you, and having seen your incredible, I recommend anyone go back and watch the Cardboard Chronicles interview with you to get that that view of your history in the hobby. But when you've got the wall behind you, and it has big cards in it, it has cards of interest to you. It's got cards from all kinds of different niches. And on your show, your great podcast, you've talked about how those are great for maybe hobby friends that don't really know the difference between an $80,000 card and a $500 card, but certain cards will speak to them. And so to me, that says that connecting with people is so important to you in this hobby. And that's such a big thing with me, community and conversation. And so, I'd just like to speak a little bit to that significance of the wall, and your collecting. Is it sort of influenced by your interest in connecting with people?
Well, I mean, in the sense that I can't put anything on the wall, Corey, that I can't tell a story about. And frequently the story, it could be who I bought it from, or about that player or card, or how I got it, or why it's there. So yeah, there's a story aspect. So if somebody comes over, it's not like a silent vigil where you look at the cards with your hands folded behind you. You can't touch anything. You can't. You got to be very reverent. You can't say anything. It's not that. It's just a bunch of guys coming over and looking at the cards and talking about the cards. So that's been a lot of fun. And and I'll probably do some more dinners here mostly for the guys around here in 2022.
That's so great.
So piggybacking off Corey's question, it's a question on my list too. It's your episode today. By the way, with Brad Askew, very good with dealing with mortality. We've talked about that too, Dr. Jim. I've done an episode or two, even solo on it, and the wall came up even in that. And I guess my question, and I'll add one to it based off what Corey was saying, but we want you to be here a long, long time. But like you said, that's part of life. Is there anything on that wall that you've already, you don't have to say who or what, but really is sort of designated, like this might go to like the Baseball Hall of Fame, or this card is already, I have this in mind for? Do you have any sort of, this card's already spoken for, maybe at a museum, or even the National, which we were talking about? Do you have any cards like that? And my other question, before you answer that one, is how often do you rearrange it much, or is it kind of set where you want it to be?
I'm definitely going to rearrange it after the next shipment I get back from BGS, which has taken a long time. John, it sounds like you're fishing for, you're the only guy that talks about mortality more than I do. So, but it's something we ought to think about. And what I did talk about that's interesting that you guys may push back on or agree is that I really came to the realization talking to Brad that maybe I need to be thinking about like a sports card executor, that my wife shouldn't have to figure out what to do. And I have some distinct segments of my collection, including the wall. No one would want the wall intact because there's too many personal things, but there's some valuable cards there. The Hall of Fame isn't going to want it. It's multi-sport. Actually, anybody would want it if it's for free. But so I'm still evolving that. And it's the problem is if I earmark that certain cards go to certain people as a gift, then I have a risk of offending a lot more people than pleasing. And so I'm trying to figure out how to manage that. And so if you got some good ideas, let me know. And same thing, because I think it's there. I'm not the only one that has a diverse collection that has some level of value that would like to see it get into hands of people that would appreciate it. And then maybe, a lot of it would be sold. Some of it could be given away. Right.
Yeah, if you happen to need an executor, if you have even a handful of non-sport cards, I am learning every day. But one area where I'm starting to gain some traction is in non-sports, everything from old, 1940s Dorothy cards to Snoop Dogg rookies in between. But I have a lot of fun with that. So, Dr. Beckett, I'm thinking about you're talking about these cards and their legacies, but I feel like legacy is important to you as well. And again, like you have decades more to go. But creating this podcast now, sharing your insight, your knowledge, I really respect the individuals you're connecting with. There's some people I really, respect, whether it's like guys like Adam Grant, who produce Basketball Card Fanatic, Josh Johnson. I'm wearing, the card ladder shirt, and Chris HOJ. These new leaders of the hobby out there. Our friend Jeremy Lee, who gave me a sticker at the National, which is a ton of fun. So connecting with these guys, it feels like it's part of, bringing these content creators together, creating the content yourself, is helping uplift the next generation of the hobby. I wonder if that's intentional.
Yeah, I think my mission statement now is to influence the influencers. And so I don't need to have 1 million people listening to the podcast, but I want the right people that can do something with it, that can take those insights and share them to the next. I'm not going to connect with all these people individually, but John has an audience, and he and I are, he's right here now, but we're on the same page about a lot of things, and so I'm sure he's influenced me. Maybe I've influenced him a little bit. So it's that's the great thing about the digital world. And a lot of this content is sort of free if you want to put it out there, and it can be easily passed along and virally shared.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question while we're talking about that. Ryan Bitter, I like this question. He asks, can we hear some stories about your favorite cards behind you? Is there a story or two on a particular card maybe you haven't shared, or it's been a while, Dr. Jim, that you kind of want to revisit? I know Clemente obviously is your guy. I don't know, or if there's something else.
Well, there's 1,000 cards there. I was in a small town in Ohio in the 70s, probably 76 maybe, put an ad in the paper, and a guy came to the hotel or the motel, whatever it was, responding to the ad that I was buying cards. And I was a professor at Bowling Green in Ohio at that time, so I was from around there. And this was outside of Columbus, and a guy walked up with a bunch of cards from the late 40s, early 50s. And in there well, here's the bad story. It's not on the wall, but in there were 2 Jackie Robinsons. Okay. Now, I've since sold one. One's on the wall, as John can see. I sold it obviously too cheap. But what the other thing I did, I may have shared this before, is that there were a whole bunch of 51 Bowmans as well. There was a mantle in there, which I still have, obviously, but there was like a wax box. It was just the empty box, but the guy kept the cards in the box. And then he had a box of 50 Bowman too. And so there were these empty boxes, and I wound up just almost giving away the boxes, which are rarer than the cards. There weren't any wrappers in there, but I can't complain when I got a couple of Jackie Robinsons out of the another punchline is that there was also a Satchel Paige leaf card in that same collection. So that's probably enough of me to give away some of these things. But that was 1976, and that was when people didn't even know about the rare leaves. The Jackie Robinson was considered not common, but it was the main 49 card set of Leafs, and they didn't even know what all the other 49. They didn't even know there were another 49, and there was a Satchel Paige in there, which I still have.
It sounds like everybody made out pretty well in the deal in the end, though, and you're very happy with the return.
The guy that I bought from did not make out very well. In hindsight.
Oh, okay. At the time,
I'm sure I paid him hundreds of dollars, and that may have been, not an insignificant fraction. It was less than what the cards are worth, obviously, but they weren't worth that much then. But you can't know that. What is that? 45 years later, they're going to be worth 100 times what they were then.
So Rich Klein just chimed in and said he showed up late. Rich, by the way, you earlier in this podcast locked Dr. Beckett in the National. You'll have to go back and listen. But let's go back to 1976. I have a question that I'm dying to know about, and you're not going to quite understand this at first. But in 1976, Manfred Mann released "Blinded by the Light." And of course, written by Bruce Springsteen. And you're like, what in the world does this have to do with anything? Well, famously, that song is the lyrics are screwed up to it. Is it revved up like a deuce, wrapped up like a deuce? People don't know, right? And then, of course, you've got Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza, Tiny Dancer. People get this wrong. And Dr. Beckett, it's been decreed that your closing music of your podcast is the best music of any podcast in the hobby. Christina Thorson herself, the authority on these things, has deemed it true. So, but the one thing I don't know is, like, you have the person singing, Minding My House of Cards. But at the end, there's like a whispery voice that says something about, like, we're doing tiny people breaks or something. Like, I don't know quite what they say. What is he saying at the end?
You guys who got out the microscope here and the audiometers or something. All credit goes to my awesome wife. I mean, she's the one that picked out the music. She said, this sounds interesting. And she believes, and I agree, that the last line of the song is, the man in the house of cards is doing all right.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
It's a little bit understated because I'm doing better than all right, but it's a nice note to leave it on. It had a little bit of a positive tone without being boisterous. And, I was floundering because I thought, well, what am I going to – you have anything to pick from? And she said, here's one. And I said,
well, kudos to your wife. That seems perfect. And thank you for clearing it up. Apologies to the legendary chat that we have going. It's Friday night. We have to have a little fun. So,
hey, I got another story for you then from what you said, because you apparently are a music guy. We had a trivia contest in the company, and Rich will remember this. And we had it was the whole company. Anybody could participate. Well, it gets down into the final rounds, and I'm still there, and Rich is still there. And so one of the categories was music. And so we did the 50s music. Rich and I are both nailing it. We did the 60s music. Rich and I are both nailing it. We did the 70s music. Rich and I are both nailing it. We did the 80s music. I missed the 80s. I was working in the 80s, and Rich was listening to music. He crushed me. And so he was, and I should have known I couldn't beat him anyway. But I used to listen to music, and then I started doing price guides, and it just I just didn't have time.
The 70s were a pretty phenomenal era for music, though, I have to say. So you did okay. Dr. Beckett,
no.
We're losing a little audio here, but Dr. Beckett, that brings up a point in terms of like being so busy in the 80s. I was curious, this is kind of a two-part question. When was it that you first really started going full-time in cards? Was it as a dealer or was it once you started at Beckett?
It's actually after that. I mean, I was a professor. I was a consultant when I started and did the books, and there was a side gig to do the books. And then I was a professor. I was a professor, then I was a consultant. When I was a consultant, it was still a side gig. And then even after I started the company, I was still a consultant. So I was working, burning my candle at both ends. I was traveling around the country doing this expert witness stuff. And so that's why the first 2 years of the company, we didn't make any money. I didn't take any money out. There was still money to take out. And so it really never took off. And so I was feeding my family by doing a lot of high-powered consulting around the country and wearing myself out probably. And then after 2 years, then I finally turned down some of these consulting gigs that were very lucrative and thought, you know what, I'm gonna jump both feet in. And that's when the company started really taking off. Not only did I give more attention to the company, I realized that I need to hire more people. And so that really helped because I think once I was full-time there, I thought, I'm full-time, it's still not getting done. I thought that would make a difference. But it just pointed out I was close enough to see, hey, we need somebody to do this. We need somebody to do this. And we started on a course of hiring lots of people over the next 10 years.
When you first started full-time, then did you have this vision of it becoming this media grading conglomerate and hiring hundreds of people? Did you have that vision at that time?
Nope. I didn't want to hire hundreds of people. I didn't want to hire anybody. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. But the problem is you couldn't not do that. It would have been irresponsible. It was a great idea. And I had a lot of the skills required, but I didn't have all the skills. I had the skills to do a price guide, but there's so much more to a company. And so I was just so blessed with having the right people there at the right time. And so, yeah, I think that's why I have so much sympathy for Tim Getch and maybe Nat Turner and any of these people that are leading companies is that, I think I was slow to hire. Because I didn't want to be bringing people on, and then if the thing turned down, then you'd have to ask them to leave. I hated that. And so I was slow. And so our people really worked hard, and when I could see everybody's working hard, the work's still not getting done or we were really struggling, we'd hire some more people. And we hired a person a month for 5 years.
Wow. So you're hiring to need, finding just great people, and that's what's propelling you forward. And I think that's, to me, I'm feeling like that's cautionary on looking at all of these new companies in the industry right now and thinking about like a lot of things have to fall in place for them to be successful. And, maybe to give it a couple of years before you fully buy into possibly a new grader. You can take your chances, but we don't know how these companies are going to pan out.
They've done the calculus, Corey. I mean, they can't do that. I mean, Tim Getch is getting all his criticism because he has so many orders. Nat Turner said, we're not going to accept any new cards because we have millions of cards in the backlog. I've seen BGS's backlog. It's mind-boggling. So they can't really put the world on hold. And so they have to aggressively hire. But I'm at the National. I'm going back into the grading room with the BGS people. Half the people I didn't know. They were brand new. I mean, I'm sure they were trained. They'd probably been there for a year, but they were not there when I was there. I didn't really know them. So the other thing I want to clarify is that, when we had our fast growth years, I'd like to say we went out and found a lot of great people. But in many cases, those great people found us. We didn't turn them into great people. I think we provided a good environment, but they through just the network of our quality people, they found other quality people and they found us. And so, I wouldn't run an ads in the paper to say, hey, in the Dallas Morning News, do you know anything about baseball cards? These are people from around the country that said, hey, I want to join your team. And we're saying, wow, yes. When can you start? Rich was like that. Rich is exceptional, but he had to move down from New Jersey, which was traumatic, but he survived.
We have a couple questions from the chat room, which is what I was hoping because I want to be interactive. Let's go with this one here, Dr. Jim. It's from Tiger Wren. It says, "Good evening, gentlemen. Dr. Beckett, what has surprised you the most about the hobby over the past 3 years? Also, what do you think about the emergence of non-sports cards over the past few years?"
Well, let me relate them together, the two parts of those questions, because what's really happened in the last few years, maybe the last 2 years more than the last 3, is that there's been this movement, and the card ladder guys are really good about this, of comparative pricing. When something gets really seemingly outrageously high priced, people say, that's getting a little pricey. I wonder what else, instead of paying that for this, maybe I'll go over here. And so that's what's added another dynamic element, that people are always looking for what's going to be the next thing that's going to move. And so that's good. Consequently, non-sport has come on the horizon. People realize the quality of the non-sport, the Q factor, the understanding of, and the fame and notoriety of the subjects of either these movies or music or TV or different celebrities. The followings are just as strong and just as passionate. And so I think that's terrific. It's made the hobby more fluid, that you're not just a baseball card collector trying to walk around with your want list for 56 tops. You're opportunistically going to what you think is a good deal. And I love that. I think that's great. And so, yeah, non-sport's here to stay. And it's if enough people go after something, the non-sport was produced in much smaller quantities than baseball. So,
yeah,
it makes it look like a good deal. And I love it when people ought to do a little more homework about it. But,
well, there's a guy in this room that does a lot more, I think, more homework than probably both of us put together. He's made me really think about, looking outside the sports genre, and also very generous to send me a few cards with no strings attached. And I thanked him already, but I'll thank him again. So, Corey's made me really look at, hey, it's not just the 4 major sports that can have a significant impact in the hobby world. Another question here. It says, can Dr. Beckett share some stories of his favorite collectors? Did you know Frank Nagy?
Yeah, I actually did a tribute episode to Frank Nagy with Frank Costello, who's another veteran collector up in the Detroit area. Yeah, I went over to Frank Nagy's house. He was an amazing guy, kind of gruff, kind of a big dude that, just kind of was understated. He had this. How many sets of 52 tops did he have? I never knew how many, but there were more than 3, and they were just sitting in a drawer. And he leaves. We were in his kind of this room. He leaves the room to go get a glass of tea, and I'm sitting there, kind of like Corey's question. He's not gone for 3 hours, but I'm sitting there with all these amazing sets in this cabinet, and free to look around. And again, I'm an honest guy, but. And I wasn't tempted. I mean, he was a really nice guy, and quite a bit older than me. But there's one of the first guys that really gambled on the hobby, gambled his marriage. I tell that story that he basically bet his life savings on cards, and he was repaid many times over, but he almost lost his marriage because he came back with a car full of cards from across the country with his car springs broken. But he was an amazing guy. Had a great eye for quality. And again, there's a guy that was very into non-sport too, of the great sets of the 30s and 40s and 50s. Very interesting.
Dr. Beckett, I have a tag-along question to that I had been meaning to ask, is that thinking after the National, what a gift it is that Adam Lefkoe is in the hobby from TNT. He's he has the gift of gab. He's a host. He does this professionally on a major stage. And when he comes into a chat room, and he's a guy who gets it too. Like he really is into learning collectors. He reaches out to all the right people, does a great job. But when he jumps into a chat, he comes on a live, and then in person at the National to be in a group with him in a chat, like he's just great at asking great questions and just like elevates the room. Were there people, that you've known, whether it's one person or maybe this group of people comes in and the room just kind of lights up and everybody has, a great time?
Well, I mean, I'm trying. That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm going to have 1,000 episodes, Corey. There's a whole bunch of people like that, and I don't know that I'd be leaving somebody out. There are any number of people that, and what my dilemma is, I don't want to wait to do these people after they die. I want to be honoring people. Kit Young is a close friend, and I did a tribute to his late wife, who was a dear friend as well. But I mean, there are some of my contemporaries I've known for a really long time. I really respect and enjoy being with. And so this is my opportunity to have them on a podcast and share the love with the rest of the world.
That's great. So just to the non-sport area, one thing I wanted to chime in with me, like for me, whether I'm picking up a 48 mic in and putting it in a slab, or like a card like a Pokemon card, they're just characters, culture that I appreciate, and I really like to have them in that form factor. It makes your collecting easy, and I think that's something people relate to. Is like we've come to love cards and sport cards, but then as we explore, like why wouldn't we collect, executives and individuals like an Elon or like Dr. James Beckett. And so,
okay, Corey. Yeah, first of all, that's the first one brought up that I really like the form factor. Not because it's me, but because it's BGS. Those others looked a lot like PSA. Okay. The other thing, which is also an outstanding company, but the other thing that you're pointing out that I've just realized, the first time I've really thought about this, is that I don't think I got any non-sport on my wall. And I think I'm going to rectify that based on this conversation. I'm going to start integrating some non-sport in it, because I have some non-sport. Because there's Bruno Sammartino that's three down and over from Jackie Robinson, okay, who was a childhood wrestling hero. I believe that is a sport. He is an athlete. I wouldn't want to get in a fight with him, even though wrestling is perhaps staged somewhat. He still was a big dude. And he never lost when I saw him lose. So I'm still calling that sport. But I don't have celebrities that don't have a sports card. And so I'm sports card insights, not card insights. But I'll think about that. That's
I love that.
Some beautiful non-sport cards.
And here's a question. There's a question from Ryan, kind of what you just said, Dr. Jim. If you are going to collect non-sports, what would be some individuals you would like to collect?
Well, I mean, I would anybody that I'd met, if I'd met somebody that was worth pointing out, I would do that. When I was a kid, I was of the age of the Zorro cards and the TV Westerns, in the 57, 58, somewhere in there. So I remember having those. But it's like when I do the dollar box. Rich knows this. I'm just looking through, and I'm not looking for something. It's just if I see it, I think that's interesting, I'll pick it up. Now, I'm not going to find some glamour non-sport cards in a dollar box, but I'll go hunting for some stuff one of these days. And Corey, thanks for the suggestion.
Absolutely. It's an honor. And, along those lines, I just was curious about this card, because the lore on it is that they gave away something like 500 of these to individuals at the National. It's the Stadium of Stars card. Do you recall getting those and handing them out at all?
Not true.
Okay.
No, you know the real story?
Yeah, I do.
They made 500.
Okay.
And they gave them to me.
Mm.
I'm sure they had some that they passed out of everybody, because Rich Klein got 500 and Grant Sandground got 500 and Frank Barning got 500. Each person got a vending box of 500. And we did a lot of trading that week. And then, I had some requests for them and things like that. And so, but I still have some. I still have a bunch. So they weren't passed out. They were, a lot of people on our team. Rich, who was it that I was talking to that had an uncut sheet? Somebody had an uncut sheet. So there's like 100 people that they did, and they did 500 sheets, chopped them up, and maybe there's some overrun, but so I still have some, and I've autographed a bunch of them for people. So
that's great.
So Bruno, or I should say Don's Field of Dreams, asked what specific part of Pittsburgh did you live in or are from?
This was kindergarten through fourth grade. It was Baldwin Whitehall, kind of South Hills. So he has correctly figured out that Bruno Sammartino was the king of wrestling in the Pittsburgh area. And again, this is probably late 50s, maybe early 60s.
Did I hear that there's a Rowdy Roddy Piper card on your wall as well?
That's not long for the wall.
Okay.
I'm going to be. There are going to be some people. I'm going to be winnowing, and I'm not going to tell Roddy this, but he's going to get winnowed. Yeah, he's going to be replaced. Now he's right next to Scottie Pippen, I believe. Now the Pipster will be there. He will be there forever. I mean, he was fun to watch, and so he's in my top 1,000. Roddy, Rowdy Roddy, nope.
All right, got to ask a question. It's not a good one, but we gotta talk about it. With the pandemic going on, there's been rumblings that maybe of a potential second shutdown of commerce and the economy. We saw what happened the first time. The hobby was a positive benefactor of that. What do we think happens if? Obviously, we don't want that to happen, but if that was to occur again, Dr. Jim, again, it's all speculation, it's all guesswork. But how do you think the hobby reacts, or what happens on the second go round, if there is a second go around?
Well, I'm an American, but I'm also a Texan. And I think what we're seeing is kind of a breakdown of the fabric of America by the differential treatment these states are in. Even within Texas, there's a big battle now between the governor and some of these cities and school districts. And so it's pretty chaotic. And but I think of the states, Texas will probably be the last one to really clamp down. And so the show that Kyle is going to have in 2 weeks is probably going to go on as planned. There may be a few more masks there, but we'll see. But some of these states, like Illinois, we're probably very fortunate that the national was not 2 weeks earlier or 2 weeks later.
Yep.
Yeah. So there was a question in the chat about Bruce Lee. I have an interesting Bruce Lee I'm going to show quick. So there's these cards from 1966 where he's as the Green Hornet. And what I think is neat about these is they cross over the comics and a major individual in Bruce Lee where he starred as Kato. So there's a lot of different cards from 66 to look into. I definitely recommend people looking into that. So to bring it back to music, and talking about some issues in the hobby, I feel like sometimes people spend too much time chasing perfection. People complain about cards miscut in boxes, or the different issues that we have in trying to chase down things, grading things not coming back as 10s when they thought they would be. And for me, that's part of the adventure. Like, that's part of the fun. And so I think of a Tom Petty song. You may know American Girl, that opens up with the guitar riff. It's going wow, wow, wow. And then Tom Petty comes in with a sound, and he does it twice in the beginning. And every single time, I've probably listened to it hundreds of times, I try to do the sound along with Tom. And it's right off beat. So sometimes I get one right, but I never get both right. But the few times I have, it's amazing. And that's kind of what I feel about the hobby is we can have these adventures chasing 10s, chasing great quality cards, trying to complete sets that are really hard. And that's what makes it fun. And so sometimes when I see people complaining about those issues, I think it'd be great if we took the perspective that, like, if everything was perfect, this wouldn't really be an adventure.
Well, I mean, the other aspect of that, again, the dynamic element of the hobby of people moving to what they perceive as being a good deal. I can't prophesy this, but I do prophesy. I do promise that the ratio between 9s and 10s and 8s and 9s will evolve over time. And when 10s get really, really pricey, those 9s, it's a mint card. It's not a bad card. It's a mint card. That's 55-45 or something. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And so I'd be very careful paying huge premiums for perfection.
Mm-hmm. And BGS 9.5s are case in point.
Yeah, or 10s or black labels, or just where do you draw the line? It's marketing, and people are accepting that, but people's taste can change. I would not. I mean, if I was going to, you just look at the really, really good vintage cards. I mean, as soon as you can, and some of the PMG Jordans and things like that. If it's an 8, are you going to reject that from your collection? You're not. So again, it can't be just about 10s. Now, if it's a base, really mass-produced card, and you can easily get a 10, well, sure. But some of these chrome and prism shiny things, they're either 9s or 10s right out of the pack. And so to pay a whole bunch extra for a 10 when a 9 is mint, I think people are going to be constantly evaluating that. And it'll be interesting to see what the card ladder people do. They'll notice if there's movement in terms of the ratios between the conditions. And, my wall, I've got that Jackie Robinson that I have, John, it's only a 7.
Only.
I'm just saying, that's not good enough for a lot of people. And it's
good enough for this guy. It's
good enough for me too.
Yeah. I'm looking at 1s or 2s and debating whether I want to pay the price.
There was something cool about going to the National in that we see all these cards on social media, and certain cards you just don't get to see at your local show. I don't see 90s PMGs, greens, and especially the greens, but the reds as well. To see them in person, it's so spectacular what the Arenas team did. Those creations they haven't been able to recreate them in what I've seen in the 2010s versions of them. And so to see those in person is really lured me in. I wish I had seen them a couple of years ago before they blew up in price, but they are stunning. And I think that's a benefit of going to a show, to really find what catches your eye.
So Ryan asked a question to you. He says, speaking of PMGs, Dr. Beckett, is that a green one over your left shoulder? He's got an eagle eye. He thinks he spots one.
Barry Sanders.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good job by Ryan. Maybe he's a future grader. He's seeing that stuff from that distance over your shoulder. So
I don't remember that's probably an 8. I'd have to go look at it. It's not behind me right now. That's a picture. That's a backdrop, and it's one of the panels, and I need to rotate them. But yeah. But do I care if it's an 8? Am I going to reject it? It's a great card. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it
absolutely
it has that feel to it, Corey. I agree. The newer ones, it's something's a classic. It's hard to make something an instant classic.
Mm-hmm. And then you look at something like Bethlehem Steel, right? The technology behind Bethlehem Steel was lost to history, and they've never been able to recreate it again. And there's just something about that texture that they made, and I hope they can find it again because it is spectacular, but it's pretty neat. The other thing along the lines of just being happy with 8s, or maybe if you're looking at super vintage, of course, a Honus we take like a 1 or 2 or 3, but even like a Babe Ruth Gowdy, a 3, a 4 are fantastic cards, and have seen those price escalations because people are realizing that and the scarcity. And at times I think it's okay. Like there are certain cards where I want to try to chase the best copy in the world if I can get it, especially when I'm in early. But there's something that I kind of like about people being able to outdo me. Hey, I have a great card, and I love it myself, but I don't have to have the best. And if you outdo me, I'll celebrate that because it's all about community in the end.
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine that kind of disrespected one of my cards because it wasn't in as good a condition as the one he had. And you know what? I just accepted it because he wasn't talking about me. He was talking about the card. And it was a
Mm.
way of saying, because he paid big bucks. He paid a lot more for his card than I did of mine. And it was an Aaron rookie. And mine was like a 5. And I have more than one, but that was the one I showed him. And he said, that's a 5. And I went, pretty nice looking card. And
Yeah.
he has one that's, I'm not going to out him, but he has a world-class collection. In fact, I've had a lot of friends that have had world-class collections. And like, I think you were saying this, Corey, I don't have any envy. I've got a great collection. They've got a great collection.
Mm-hmm.
I have a broader collection than many people, a deeper collection. But I'm not going after the glamour cards now. I mean, I have enough of the older good cards, and I'm not really that eager to trade an Aaron rookie for a Zion Williamson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have that broad-based collection as well. It's kind of the angle I've gone, and I constantly am wrestling with: do I consolidate and go into certain cards that I love? And that's going to be an ongoing, collection thought process over the coming years, I think. So I lost it. John, do you have something?
Well, I was going to ask Dr. Jim, is there, with your vintage collection, is there a card you have? Like, what card do you have the most multiples of? Like you said, you have more than one Aaron. Is there a particular kind of iconic card that you have?
You are still fishing. You want the answer to be a 48 leaf.
No, I know. I think you said you only have one now that you sold one you'd like to do over, but so I'm not fishing for Jackie info. But is it Clemente or is it someone else that you just said, hey, I'm going to get more of these, or the price is just too right to not buy more?
All of my purchases, almost all my purchases, were in the 70s, and I guess I've very rarely bought a card. I've almost always bought a collection, and so when I bought a collection in the 70s, in fact, I bought out tables. I was a very aggressive dealer back in the 70s. I wasn't doing price guides, and I was using the knowledge that I had to. I was paying the prices that they wanted, but I'd buy out dealers and I'd buy large collections. And so when I bought the collection, then I would sell the cards that I didn't care about. And I'd keep the Clementes. If there was a Clemente in there that I liked, I'd keep it. If I didn't like it, and I already had it, I'd sell it. But so I didn't accumulate them as much as I didn't eliminate them. When I got them, I kept them. Same thing, Mickey Mantle. If I got a Mantle and it was in decent shape, if it was in bad shape, maybe I'd sell it. But I'd sell the cards I didn't want, and I kept the stuff that I thought. And it wasn't mainly for the value. I think this is great trade stock. If I want to trade for something I need, which I did sometimes, these Mickey Mantles are going to trade for just about anybody else in the set. So I have some extra Mantles. I have some extra Clementes. I have some extra Willie Mazes. But I'm already retired, so I'm not retiring on it. I already am retired. But so I didn't go out and buy them as much as I bought a collection. They were in there, and I get the money. Instead, some people buy a collection and they sell the best cards to get their money back. I'm the slow, patient flipper. I sold the worst cards to get my money back, and then I kept the best cards. And so now I'm sitting here. I have some extra really good cards.
I love
Rich
it. I'm taking notes. John, I was going to say you brought. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So Rich says, to answer the question about locking Jim in the National, he'd probably be happiest seeing the things he'd never seen before, which is probably very little. But
there's always something. Rich and I would always see something every year that we'd never seen before, and we try to pick it up. Try to buy it so we can photograph it and expand the almanacs and things like that.
Herman asked a question. I've asked this question too, so I sort of know the answer. But Herman asks, is there a card that Dr. Beckett has been chasing that he hasn't been able to find?
I don't think so. I mean, I've been in the hobby for so long. If I really was chasing it, I would get it. I mean, I've told you I was an underbidder. I've been an underbidder more than once on a Lajoie, so I don't have that. I've been the underbidder on a Wagner, so I don't have that. My friend wanted me to buy a plank, and turned out it was counterfeit. So I'm glad I didn't. I passed on that. Those were some of the really big cards in the day. So I don't. Yeah, I don't really chase individual cards anymore. Yeah. In the old days, I had a want list, and so I was trying to complete sets. And now most of those sets I've disbanded or sold off and things like that. So I'm really just collecting on my wall, and I've got extra stuff that I'm trying to get rid of. I'm old. I'm not going to be buried with this stuff. I'm going to try to find a home gradually for more and more stuff. 1% a month I'd like to sell. 100 months I'd be done.
John, you keep angling for this Jackie Robinson card from Dr. Beckett. And it makes me think about, hobby gifts. And obviously, Jackies usually don't fall into that category, not at least in 2021. But I'm someone where I get, if I'm lucky and I fall into a handful of cards early, I'm happy to share, with someone who I think it's right home and where it's a low cost to me or whatever. But I was wondering, Dr. Beckett, is there a particular hobby gift that you've received over the years that especially touched you? Or
well, any gift touches me. In fact, I think my episode last Christmas, I think, was about not necessarily rack or random acts of kindness, but kind of I did one on kind of deferred gratification and the other on unsolicited gifts that people give cards, and it probably makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I've had the discomfort of having people give me a very nice gift without wanting anything in return. But that's not as uncomfortable as having somebody give me a gift and then giving me a bill for it. I had a guy say, "Hey, I picked this out for you. I knew you'd love it." And I said, "Oh, that's fabulous." He said, "That'll be $500." What? And I said, "Okay."
Yeah, Josh Johnson from Cardboard Chronicles has talked about some of the best gifts you can give to a serious card collector, especially someone like him that has a very narrow range, is just product. Give them some top loaders, some penny sleeves, and if it's someone personally in your family, that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to share this while we're talking about racks, and I mentioned Corey's been gracious with a few my way, which is awesome, including the most recent. It's a Lady Gaga. It's here somewhere, right here. I'm a big Lady Gaga. I'll admit it. I'm a big Lady Gaga. But speaking of the Jackie, a young man, Max Scocher, Michigan, him and his brother Owen and Rex, his father, own a store in Michigan, doing very well. And they know the whole Jackie deal. And he's very artistic. And so he actually made, this is handmade, a 48 leaf, the Jackie. And then he wrote 101 on the back to John, Sports Card Nation, and he signed it. And this goes, I have you can't see it on camera, but I have a rotating kind of acrylic case here where I put some additional cards, and I actually unlocked it to pull this card out. So every day I see it. And it's that kind of stuff, guys. You can't put a price on something like that. That a young man took time out of his day to make that, knowing what the card. Yep, there you go.
One of two.
Who got the second? They kept one.
No, I gave.
Sent me two, but I don't know how many others are out there. But John, thank you for that. That wasn't a random act of kindness. That was just a kindness. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And it's those things. It's what makes the hobby great. And, this card, like with this, it's going to sit in that case. And it might be the closest I come to the actual card, and that's fine. There's worse things in life than that. But it's a reminder every day to be more giving as much as I can be in many forms of facet, not just cards, but information, help, and what have you. So it's probably a good note. We're about at the hour mark, and I want to thank Corey, Dr. Jim, first episode of Breaking Cardboard. I thought it went well. To those watching in the chat, thank you for all the great comments and questions. We all appreciate that. This show will be on the second Friday of each month. That's the plan, with one guest host and one guest, like tonight. If you don't catch the show live, it will be released in audio form on the Sports Card Nation platform. So if you listen to Sports Card Nation, either Saturday or Sunday, you can get the audio edition of what you heard here tonight. If you're listening to the audio version, just know that the second Friday of every month, we're live at 9:30. We'd love to see you in person and interact and hear your thoughts and comments. And so, gentlemen, again, thanks for making some time on the first episode, and I appreciate it. Any kind of closing thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, well, John, Dr. Beckett, I just wanted to say that this has been a highlight of my hobby experience. Jumping back in with my son, of course, is the greatest highlight, collecting with him. But to connect with legends like yourself and have this time and conversation, I thank you so much.
No problem.
Great to get to know you, Corey, for an hour here, and I look forward to another interaction at some point. And John, I think you're the hardest working podcaster out there. I got to up my game.
Well, you do it every day. I'd be lying if I said I did it every day. So you got a good pace. I just work too hard maybe on a couple days. You're doing it. You're grinding it every day. So it's we all have different approaches, right? Like collecting. So I love what you do, and I know a lot of other people do as well. So thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Corey.